Welcome to the VandySports podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. We've got a very special show for you today. This is basically going to be the history of VandySports. I rounded up a couple of my old partners, Mike Rapp and Jesse Johnson. Both those guys were with me for a decade or more. We're going to talk about the history of VandySports, how we came about, just the good, bad, the funny, and everything in between. It's the longest episode we have ever done, and I sure hope you enjoyed, because I enjoyed doing this one. This episode is presented by the Well Coffee House, a Nashville area coffee house which provides fresh roasted coffee along with house-made pastries, breakfast, and lunch offerings. 5 locations to serve you in the Nashville area: Brentwood, Green Hills, downtown, Bellevue, and the Cool Springs Lifeway. More information can be found at wellcoffeehouse.org. The Well Coffee House, where coffee changes lives. We also thank our co-sponsor, Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center, which is located in the Gulch. Our news presented by Sutherland and Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt in any type of accident, call Taylor or Russell at 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. Vanderbilt has opened its fall camp. It had 3 practices. All were closed to the media. That changes Monday. VandySports will be there with practice access for 20 minutes and some interviews with coaches and players. We will have that for you after Monday's practice, which will be in the evening. Today's guest line is brought to you by Boll & Branch, started by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen. I've slept on their sheets for years. They're amazing sheets. I had no clue how much I would like them until I got them, and I've had them now for 6 years. And I've not slept on anything else since. They are fair trade certified. That means they're made under safe conditions by men and women who are treated and paid fairly. Try them for a month. You can return them for free, but you won't want to. Once you have the sheets, try the mattress. That was voted best mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com. That's spelled B-O-L-L. Enter the promo code Vandy. Get $50 off your first set of sheets. We have a very special podcast tonight. This is a blast from the past. I've got Mike Rapp and Jesse Johnson joining me. Both those guys were instrumental, does not do the word justice, in getting us off the ground at VandySports.com. Hello, guys. It's really a thrill to be doing this with both of you guys this evening.
It's the Wayback Machine.
It is. The Wayback Machine didn't exist when we started the site, but I think it does now.
It does. We're proof of it.
Jesse, are you still with us here? Jesse, can you hear us?
I cannot hear him.
I can't either. Let's see if he's still here.
Can you hear me?
Yes, there we go.
Yes, there he is.
Jesse, welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for welcoming me in. It's great to be back and be able to talk to you guys for the first time in like 4 or 5 years, I guess it's been.
It's been a while.
It's awesome to hear your voice, man.
Yeah.
It's great to hear your voice tonight.
Even if it does come with technical difficulties. But we'll work through those. First of all, I know folks are curious on what you're doing these days, so I'll start with you, Mike.
Back when I joined VandySports.com, I was running an agency, and I've continued in that world. I'm currently working for HCA Healthcare here in Nashville for the Cancer Research Division, helping design a new software platform for them to help test cancer drugs. So to go from taking pictures of baseball players to cancer, I guess that's as big a shift as you can make, but that's what I'm doing now, and so far it's been really fun and really exciting to be a part of something like that.
Well, I don't know if that's the biggest shift of any of us in the group, because Jesse is now out in California, and I'll give it to him to update the audience on what he's doing these days.
Besides enjoying some sunny California weather with beautiful ocean and obviously a beautiful fiance, pretty much have been doing e-commerce, customer service stuff. I haven't been in the writing business since I had to leave CBS last year. Everybody, I'm sure most people remember I was with 24/7 after I left VandySports. I don't know if we want to endorse them or whatnot, but anyway, I have been looking for other stuff out here, but it's basically this was a family move and decision, so I'm just working.
And speaking of family, if we hear a fourth voice joining, that's my son. We've got a bonus room right behind my office in the house. He is 5 and into some combination of baseball on TV and playing soccer himself. So he's
the Dodgers won.
and he's just letting me know that the Dodgers won. Okay, thank you, bud. Yes.
All right. Good to know.
Yeah, he's very, very excited about the things that he is into. And again, I'm excited about this podcast. I think this will be a lot of fun tonight as we walk people through how this whole thing started. For me, I was approached in the winter of 2003. I'd never formally written. I was actually thinking of getting into this. A buddy of mine named Brent High, people in the Nashville area may know that name in terms of athletic promotions. He's done some stuff with the Sounds and all kinds of places. Brent asked me to start a Rivals Vanderbilt site, which I had no business doing in the least. But we did it. I remember we started at the first week of January 2003. I quickly discovered that this was not going to work as a one-man band. And Mike, you had been posting, all three of us were at Vandy Mania at the time, just as posters. Mike, you posted a lot. I think, Jesse, you posted a good bit. I did not post much at all, but I kind of hung around. So I kind of knew your personalities through that. And
you still chose to work with us.
Yeah, well, likewise. And Mike, I'll start with you. I remember you kind of started dropping in on our board and talking, and I reached out to you, and I'll just let you take it from there.
Well, yeah, I mean, people don't realize back then there was really no such thing as really much of these online communities. Even the ones that existed didn't have subscriptions. I mean, people don't understand, but the significance of that. Of course, the three of us do, because that was back when the idea of selling subscriptions to content was laughable. And you called me and said, "Hey, Rivals has asked me to do this site, and I'm wondering if you'd like to help me." And I was, I loved Vanderbilt athletics. And I was interested in Vandy, obviously, but I had a lot going on in my normal life. And I remember, if I remember right, I turned you down. And you said, look, it's going to be a lot of fun. I think you'd be great. I think we'd have a lot of fun together. And I turned you down a second time. And then you said, "Look, I'll get you a post and you can take pictures on the sidelines." And I said, "I'm in," And so that was really my first foray into professional photography. Personally, I'd been involved in a lot of photography in previous jobs as a creative director at record companies, but I'd never stood on the sidelines taking pictures. There's a whole different world, a whole different type of photography. Back then, that was when digital was just kind of taking off. And we had, Chris, I think we had 30 subscribers at the time, and half of them were there by mistake.
That's absolutely true. Yes, and 30 may be overstating it.
I think we literally were making. How much were we? I don't even want to talk about how much we were making.
Let me interrupt you. I know this. I know the first year that I did this, my only expenses were an internet connection and like paper for the printer, or I mean, whatever. I mean, there's not a lot of expenses. Mileage. I know that it was. I was still writing off tax losses, I think, until our third year. That's how bad it was. Of course, there wasn't, there wasn't exactly a cornucopia of sports success at the very start either. Although that first year we did cover a Sweet 16, but yeah, it was pretty bleak when we started.
Well, I mean, there were really no expectations, honestly. I mean, not only did the market have no expectations of us, Rivals had no expectations of us. I mean, they were just happy to have a Vanderbilt site. I don't think they ever expected we'd ever have more than 300 subscribers. I think at one point they said 300 will be the max you'll ever have, and good luck with that.
Well, no, I remember it differently because I think at first. By the way, first of all, do you remember the first time you and I ever met? Because I do. I'm going to see if you can remember it too.
I don't remember.
You and I met the first time we met face to face. We ate at that old Chinese place, which is right next to where the Franklin Theater is. They haven't been in existence for probably 10 years. I had a really good Chinese buffet, and I think that was the first time you turned me down.
Hunan.
But yeah, but we got to be friends. But I do remember when we started a few months in, you and I met with the guy at Rivals, and he said, "Oh, you guys will be at X amount of subs, within 6 months." And by the way, we still 17 years later have not hit X. That's kind of the market for this. But I remember, I think that they thought that, okay, it's the SEC. It's like everybody else. You just do what everybody else does, and the numbers will follow. That was kind of a rude awakening to it's just never going to be a big audience. So I think we had to adjust expectations quickly from there and just kind of figure out, okay, if we do this, there's going to have to be a few things present. We're going to have to like what we do and we have to like each other.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I didn't necessarily see it as a moneymaker as much as it was learning something new and getting to hang with you. And, back then was the wild, wild west of reporting. A lot of .com publishers couldn't even get credentials to the teams that they covered. And, even we were kind of ostracized. I mean, this was back when, if you were going to a Vanderbilt basketball game, there might be 15 photographers in the end zone and probably twice that many reporters, covering the game. And these people, I think, literally laughed at us. I mean, a lot of them, they aren't laughing now. Most of those guys don't have jobs in sports anymore. And now it's kind of silly to look back on it and think what it could have become and what the expectation was. I think a lot of that, frankly, has to do with you and Jesse, and I think, to some degree, Vanderbilt athletics. I mean, Vandy has continued to try to do what they do well, and it took us a while to figure out what that meant for us. But I remember we covered women's tennis some, and a lot of weird things at the time, just trying to figure out soccer. I guess throwing a lot of lures in the water and seeing if we catch anything. But it went from 30 subscribers to 50 to 70 to 100 and then 150 and then 300, and all of a sudden we looked up and went, all of a sudden there weren't 15 reporters at games anymore. There were 7. You and I were 2 of them. So then Jesse came on board and really sort of changed the equation entirely. I think gave us a level of credibility in football recruiting, especially that you and I could never have had on our own.
No, and I want to go to Jesse. We've not left him out intentionally at this point. I just wanted to do this chronologically. Well, I hope you can hear us. Your volume is a little low, but I think we will hopefully fix that for our audience. But Jesse, I know that I came to you, or Mike and I did, based on Tommy Crockett's recommendation, which was one of the best things that ever happened to us. I'm trying to remember, did you come to us in 04, 05? My timeline's a little hazier with you in terms of when you first came on.
Yeah, I came it was in the summer of 2004. Actually, it was right after, you mentioned the Sweet 16 run. It was right after that, I believe.
Yeah.
If my timeline's right or wrong, I don't know. We're all getting older.
I think that's right.
But but yeah, I came on around 2004. Christopher Bond came to me. He sent me some messages. He'd never talked to me before or anything like that. The Purier, and said something like, because I had written a few things for Don Yates over at Vandy Mania, just from him asking me, because I was just a poster too, he said I seemed to be into recruiting, seemed to be into the means of kids getting to college, and he didn't have much interest in it. So he was like, "Hey, why don't you do this?" And I said, "Sure, I'll do it." And anyways, Chris Bond came to me and said something about VandySports, and I didn't even know VandySports existed. Honestly, I mean, I knew Rivals existed, but I barely even ventured and noticed them too much. So, he said something about it. I think Chris, then we had a phone call conversation before finally meeting in person, maybe a couple of weeks later, because it was during the summer and everything. But I think that's how everything started.
And I want to throw something in here. If people don't understand and they've never met us, Mike, and I'll let you address this. I think the three of us are about as different as it gets.
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, a lot of small businesses start up because our friends, they want to work together, but they usually fail because there's so much overlap between the interests of the partners. They can't get along. And I think the three of us just had very different interests in this triangle of sports coverage, and our interests just didn't overlap. And I think you're right. I think it really was a big reason we were successful.
Well, and Mike, you remember we were
definitely different.
Yeah, and the thing was, recruiting was the lifeblood of the network. It branched out into more journalism later and coverage of things, but when you thought of Rivals at the time, you thought of recruiting, and a lot of people still do. And Jesse, where you really gave us so much value and I think allowed us to grow, Mike and I were okay with recruiting, but not crazy about it.
Yeah.
You were passionate about it. You jumped in with both feet. And Mike and I had done it and made the calls for a couple of years. Without you jumping in and doing what you did in recruiting, and I say this endearingly, you were a maniac with it. I mean, I couldn't believe the time that you put in and the stuff that you knew, but that really freed us up to hit more of the team end and really was, I think, where we started to take off.
Yeah. I always had an interest in recruiting way back when I was in high school. I did my high school sports newspaper, and talk to guys on the football team, basketball teams about their college recruitment every now and then, and it was something that I kind of gravitated to then towards college. I grew up in Nashville like you did and everything, so I grew up around Vanderbilt, so I followed Vanderbilt my whole life. So that was usually the school that I was most interested in seeing what was going on, especially for a school that had to recruit differently than other schools that they played against. So I followed Vanderbilt recruiting in football for probably 15 years before we ever, talked and before this was ever pitched to me. So yeah, I had passion behind it. I remember the first year or so doing it, and I'd say Andrew Kerr was awesome during the transition because the former Vanderbilt graduate assistant and walk-on player. He was very helpful to me. He mentored me a lot during those first couple of months that I came aboard and did that, and just basically started off cold calling a lot of kids and just asking them questions, and then eventually I think I got into my interviewing and in real coverage groove maybe around 2006, 2007.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Andrew, I'd forgot, Andrew was with us for maybe 6 months or a year. Andrew had been a GA and a contact that I had, Mike, when you and I started this, and then he joined us as a partner for a while and then got smart and said, hey, there's not a lot of money in this, and I've got other stuff to do with my life. I'm getting married and those things, but just a great guy. And I'd forgotten that Andrew was with us for maybe a year before Jesse joined us.
Yeah, and I still see Andrew quite a bit now. Andrew owns a firm that specializes in healthcare software consulting, and their office is Their office is about 100 yards from mine, down near Centennial Park. So I actually see him quite a bit. He's doing really well. We still laugh about it. I mean, he was like, "Yeah, I don't think I want to really I don't think I want to work this hard. I mean, this is like fun, but if we're going to work this hard, I got to make some money doing it." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's probably not going to work." So, but he also kind of gave us some credibility at Vandy. I mean, early on, he had contacts there, and I think it helped us early on.
Oh, certainly. And Andrew was a guy that just everybody loved.
Yeah, still does, actually.
Yeah.
He's quite a successful author and speaker.
Yeah, I see him every now and then at tailgate. Of course, Andrew walked onto the football team and actually played meaningful reps in the late 90s, mostly on special teams. Had a few carries as a running back. But, Mike, I want to go back to our time when we first started the first year. Do you remember the first thing that you and I ever covered? I think you do, but I'm going to test you here.
Golly. The first thing we ever covered? No, I don't know. I don't remember. Tell me.
You and I did the Belmont-Vandy basketball game, the one that they played at Belmont. It was the first year. It was
that was the first? Wow.
Yes, it was the first thing you and I did that we actually had credentials to. That you did. I remember you actually came and I remember talking to you. I think I might have covered some football in 2003 now that I think about it, but I don't think you were with me. But I remember maybe I'm getting mixed up, but I very clearly remember you and I going to down to Belmont in 2004 when Vanderbilt opened its season and Kevin had gone 3-13 or whatever in the league and had that 62-point loss to Kentucky. And we were wondering, is this going to be it for him? And we go down to Belmont, and they win that first game, and they win, I don't know, 10 or 12 to start the season. But I remember you and I walking into Belmont that night and just thinking, okay, this is going to be a weird year. I wonder what it's going to be like.
I think that was the inaugural. Wasn't that the inaugural game at the Curb Event Center that was like a kickoff game?
It was. It sure was.
I was there as a spectator as well. I was there as a spectator.
Oh, really? Oh man, that's wild.
Yeah, that would have been November of 2003. Yeah, you definitely. I think I'd been doing some football, but that was the first time that I actually formally had a photographer there covering. So it was me and you at the Curb Center that night.
Wow. Yeah, that was weird. That was a strange evening. I remember it really clearly. Vanderbilt was wearing all black. Mario Moore. I mean, you had no idea what in the world was going to happen. I think Jason Huerta was on that team.
Yes. That was
Freegie's senior year. Yeah, now that turned out to be a heck of a year. Yeah, that was a strange feeling covering that. I think it was just strange to be at an arena like that within walking distance of the Vanderbilt campus. And then Kevin and of course Rick were really good friends. They hated playing each other. That was an interesting way to kick it all off. That's for sure.
And I remember too, 4 months later being in Atlanta, and they had that big game with Mississippi State that went to overtime that they won, and they'd had that really good year. They were 8-8 in the league, and you figured they were going to get a bid. That was the one that kind of cemented their bid. They ended up getting, I think, a 6 seed and going to the Sweet 16. I just remember you and I working crazy hours that tournament.
I remember you and I have talked about this several times over the years, but I remember that tournament really well. That was sort of the tournament where I went, this is actually pretty fun. And I was sitting in the end zone shooting. You were on press row, which, we were kind of catty-cornered from each other. We were too far away to actually talk to each other, but we could make eye contact and text each other. And I remember Mississippi State was the number 1 seed. Man, they were an absolute powerhouse. And there were a lot of State fans at that game. That was like, I would guess there was probably 8,000 to 10,000 Mississippi State fans at that game. And I remember it very vividly because I think didn't that game go into overtime?
It did.
Yeah, it went to double overtime.
Yeah. there was a timeout called, and I was thinking, here I am sitting, the first SEC tournament I've ever photographed, which is, for those who don't realize, when you're shooting a tournament, those tournaments are made for the media. They're not really made for spectators. So when you're shooting photography, the photographers are 3 rows deep on both ends. You've got AP people, you've got ESPN, it's like a who's who of sports coverage, and then me, sitting down there on an apple cart trying to take pictures. And this game goes into overtime, and it was incredibly exciting, very intense. And they come out of Vandy was basically about to take the game. It was a decisive moment. They come out of the timeout, and Freegee walks over. There was an out-of-bounds play. Freegee walks over, and he and I had gotten to know each other by that point, and I just happened to be looking at him. I remember so vividly, he had his hands on his shorts, kind of bending over, kind of gathering his thoughts, and he looked up at me, and we met eyes, and I kind of grinned, and he winked at me. And I went, no way. No way. And it was like, I asked him about it after the game. He said, it's really weird. He said, at that exact moment, I knew we were going to win the game. I just knew it. And, it ended up becoming kind of the beginning of our coverage because, man, we worked crazy hours. I remember probably one of my fondest memories, Chris, was, we stayed until they closed the arena that night. We were the last journalists in the press room. I remember Tom Richardson coming out to get some snacks in the media room and was shocked to see us. And then I think we filed our story at about 2 a.m., went back to the hotel, couldn't sleep. I think that was, for me, that was kind of the beginning. That was kind of the moment where I went, this could be pretty fun. We might actually have a chance to do something significant. They went on, of course, to win that game, and kind of became the launching pad for Kevin's career at Vanderbilt.
Do you remember why
Chris, you there?
Do you remember why we couldn't sleep? I mean, other than finishing at 2:30 in the morning,
Yeah.
Because I sure do.
Yes, I do. Why don't you tell that story?
Okay, it is 6 in the morning, and we're maybe 3 hours into sleep.
Maybe.
And we're on the 19th floor of whatever it was in downtown Atlanta, one of those huge hotels, the Peachtree, or I don't remember what it was. And we have Kentucky fans on the streets at 6-something in the morning doing a cats cheer. And the way that building was constructed, it had like glass walls, so the sound went all the way up, and that's what woke us up in the morning. I don't think we ever really did get back to sleep.
Well, let's be clear. You come into the hotel, and there's sheets of paper in the lobby for Kentucky fans as a primer to learn the cheers that they are expected to perform at the game later that day. So they were rehearsing on the street. They were rehearsing for the game. And I was thinking, good Lord, people, get a life. Please let us sleep. But, that's SEC basketball right there. I remember you coming down that morning going, oh, my God, I don't care if I ever see another Kentucky fan as long as I live.
Now, Jesse, did you start going in the press box with us that next fall in 2004?
In 2004, I think I kind of co-opted. I kind of came in for a few games where you needed me, and then the rest of the time, I remember the Rutgers game, that horrible Rutgers game. I was in the stand with Henry Nichols.
God, that was horrible.
We remember that night very, very well. But yeah, 2005 was the first year that I was full-time up in the press box.
Yeah, what are your first memories of like being on the beat, being in press conferences, those things? What are the things that really stand out to you?
One of the things that really stood out to me the most, I still remember it vividly, was that summer before the 2005 season. I remember, you had some personal issues and had to bow out for a little bit, and I, just kept going, as much as I could. And they had the Rivals Publishers Conference right there at the Marriott, right near Vanderbilt Stadium. And we're meeting all these people, and it's just really exciting because I'm getting to see all these writers that some of them I had actually already corresponded with a few times in emails or whatnot, but now I was actually seeing them in person. And you were walking around introducing me to people, and we were just talking, and then we met someone from the Ole Miss site, and I can't remember who the actual gentleman
Grant
was.
Gannon. Yes. Yeah.
Well, it wasn't Grant. Grant wasn't the person that did this. One of his assistants, and I can't remember his name, and I don't want to slander anybody if I got the name wrong, so I'm not even going to guess his name. But he said very vividly, we're sitting there talking, and he stops and he says, and he kind of motions towards the football field. We're in the Marriott Hotel, and he's like motioning towards the football field, and he's like, in just a few months or next month or something like that, just imagine you're just going to see. Ole Miss basically, it was so dramatic what he was saying. They were going to just obliterate Vanderbilt or whatnot. And of course, I disagreed with him. I didn't think Ole Miss was that good coming into the season, and I wasn't big on Ed Orgeron. And I just always remember because Vanderbilt then went on to beat them that year, of course, when they started 4-0 that season. I remember the Wake Forest game when Vanderbilt did the season opener when the hotel next to Vanderbilt started the Commodore Cafe or whatnot for the first time, and there was a bunch of fans that came in and watched it. Just Jay Cutler's senior year, was kind of a great introduction to me to covering the football program and covering, recruiting, especially because, it gave Vanderbilt, who really hadn't had a name in football since probably Whit Taylor or Chris Gaines or, someone like that. It finally gave them at least a name, that people knew about, and recruits talked about him for 2 or 3 years after that.
Yeah, back to the Ole Miss side. I know that was under different management. I want to ask you though. I went to what year was the year that they opened at Wake?
It was 2005.
Did you go up there? Because I know Brett Hayton and I went on that trip. Were you on that one with us?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
No, you were.
Okay.
You guys. You went on site, and I was like kind of trying to. We would always, start up the season wanting to try to advertise. We get our schedule cards and roster cards, those cool cards that Mike would always make up and everything, and we try to pass them out and everything. And that was what we were trying to do that night when they were having that hosting, that viewing event in that hotel. So that's kind of what I was trying to do that night. So the first time that I actually traveled to an away game to cover, that was the next season when I went down to Tuscaloosa to cover Vanderbilt playing Alabama. That was my first time that I actually traveled away because you couldn't make that trip, I believe.
Speaking of publishers conferences, I don't know, Jesse, this may have been before you were with us. I think it was. Mm-hmm. But Mike, were you with me at the one that they had at the Marriott across from Vanderbilt Stadium? I think it was in 2004.
Yeah. No, it was 2005. That's what I was just talking about.
Okay. Well, I think I went to one before that. It was the year. Mm-hmm. It was when Auburn was trying to hire Tim Corbin. I remember being at that conference and talking to the Auburn guys at the time, and everybody, I think they just assumed it was a foregone conclusion that Corbin would take that job. And that's one of my first memories when you say publisher conference was trying to run that thing down in the middle of that event.
Yeah, I think that was 2000. Was that 2006, possibly?
No, I think it was. I think Auburn tried to grab him. Yeah, Auburn tried to grab him in 2004 after the regional, I believe, and then LSU, of course, tried again in 2007.
You're correct. Yeah, Auburn tried in 2004. Oregon tried in, I think, 2000 after the 2007 season, I believe, or 2008 season. Everybody tried to get Tim, so luckily for Vanderbilt, they didn't get him.
Mike, I want to go back to you because you always had a different view of things than we did because you were on the field. What are your first memories of covering baseball?
Well, I remember you saying, I remember very vividly you telling me they've hired this guy from Clemson and he's going to change everything. And I had gone to, I had attended Oral Roberts University where we had a top 5 in the nation baseball program. So I was not, I wasn't uneducated about the realities of college baseball in general, but I was kind of like, yeah, whatever. You know, it's crazy to think about it this way now, because now they're clearly the best baseball program, you know, in all of college athletics. But I remember going down there, and you know, that was before there was really anything. And I had never shot baseball at that point. I mean, I didn't even know really what I was doing. I was frankly just afraid I was going to get hit with a ball and embarrass everybody, and everybody would laugh at me. So I just tried to stay out of the way for the most part. But I remember some of the kids on those early teams, like Warner Jones, you know, they were more serious about Tim and about the program than I could have ever anticipated they would have been. I think that's what really surprised me more than anything. I really have always related to Tim. I've always related to his kind of builder mentality, and you know, he's always been the same way that he is now. He's never been any different, as you well know. But when they went to a regional and, you know, pretty much manhandled Virginia, they went on the road, manhandled Virginia in 3 straight games. Then, of course, they went to Texas and got destroyed. That's when you realize, hey, wait a minute, you know, this actually could become something significant. You know, and people don't realize SEC baseball was a big deal back then, but not like it is today. You know, I mean, back then SEC baseball was still the kind of one of the kings of the hill, but it wasn't the only one. Big 12 and the Pac, you know, whatever it was back then. I don't think it was Pac-10 back then. They were all legit. But it just seemed to continue to grow every year. And Tim never allowed himself to take whatever. I remember Tim saying to me, he said, my greatest fear at Vanderbilt is that they'll be happy with just being pretty good. And my plan is to win a national championship. And I thought it was cute, right? It was kind of awesome that he would say that, but I know he meant it. But I don't know that even he could have imagined that it would become what it has become now. I think it's just the situation kind of like Duke in basketball where, to be honest, everything kind of fell into place at the exact right place, at the exact right time, with the exact right coach, in the exact right league. And I guess you could say the rest is history now. I think I think we'll look back 20 years. I think history will look back 50 years, 100 years, and say that was what's happened at Vanderbilt baseball is historic in every way. It's probably not repeatable. It was lightning in a bottle, and it still is.
Jesse, you have a really unique perspective on it because you followed that program for a long time before Mike and I did. And
yeah, I never had gone to a game. I couldn't have told you where the baseball stadium was before you dragged me down there.
Well, Jesse certainly knew.
I grew up around Vanderbilt baseball. That was another one of the, you know, most people that grew up around Vanderbilt or, you know, follow Vanderbilt, I think they kind of get that they want to see the underdog, you know, just because Vanderbilt's stacked. So many things are stacked against them in pretty much all the major sports. I know basketball, historically, they've been pretty competitive, but still, they're even got some shortcomings there at times. But so baseball, basically, baseball was my first love of sports. It's still my favorite sport. But me and my dad, we would go down to the little Vanderbilt baseball stadium. It wasn't It wasn't named after Hawkins yet, Mr. Hawkins. And basically, we would be like one or two of 10 or maybe 15 people that were even there. For the longest time, there was no real stadium. It was just a chain link fence with some bleachers, just like you would get at a Little League park, honestly. But I supported the team, and they used to have their auctions so they could get new uniforms every year, and I would go to their card shows that they'd have at the top of the stadium club, at the top of the parking lot, and everything. And they were always a baseball program that I believed, and not just because I became a fan or whatnot, but I believe just because of the nature of college baseball. College baseball players, if they do go to college, they at least have 3 years that they're going to presumably be there. And so they're there because they want to be there. So I always believed that Vanderbilt could be one of those schools that could be pretty successful. And they always had some good hitters, some good players. The whole reason why I was called Vandy Hunter, my tag that everybody knows, it's still my email today, was because of Hunter Bledsoe, who was, a SEC Player of the Year, All-American, just right before Tim came in, who unfortunately had a season where he was declared ineligible because of a transfer snafu that happened. And just, I saw it as something that could be very successful if they ever got the right things to fall into place, and they did when Mr. Hawkins' family and a couple of other people put their money into the program. And then Tim came in with so much energy. Eric came in with him with so much energy. Little Corbin, it was crazy seeing them play each other for the national championship a couple of months ago. It was just, it was something that I definitely, it was one of my fondest memories of covering the programs, Vanderbilt sports, at VandySports, was the 2007 season when we went down, won the SEC championship. Then we went down to the SEC baseball tournament in Hoover. Chris, remember the Ole Miss game, that crazy night? Mike came down a little bit later, so we all hung together and covered that thrilling tournament. And then it was actually the night that they lost to Michigan in the NCAA regional. I just sat there. I came out of the press box and sat down with Vandy Whistler, actually, and just kind of soaked it all in, because I was just thinking, this is everything that I always thought that it could be, and it actually happened. And I think it was another thing that helped our company, our site, really grow, was because of just things like that happening to people that were fans, lifelong fans, grew up around it or whatnot. Seeing that kind of happen, I think, just built into our success, and it gave us energy. It gave us a passion for it. I know it gave me a passion for it. It made me eager to see what I could do to give Vanderbilt a voice, by giving the best coverage I could. And I had a lot of fun.
I'm going to go to the mailbag in a minute because our listeners have got a lot of questions for us. But Mike, you remember this, I'm sure, very well. It just seemed like we were anonymous for a few years before it finally started to take off. I think baseball helped. And I remember I would just write stories for a while and just think, okay, I'm going to drop something in here like, a UFO landed on midfield at halftime of the game and took off with Jay Cutler, just to see if anybody was reading at the time. It really was a struggle, I think, just to get on people's radar at the time.
Well, I think we had a lot of people that really loved us, but it's impossible to imagine this. But this was before the internet really kind of had taken off and overtaken the general media. And even if you were awesome, it just wasn't, there wasn't anybody really that was an attraction or a destination online. The bigger schools like Texas and Florida State, they had more more subscribers, because they had larger fan bases. But nobody really like it's not they didn't like us. There was not a lot of passion for it either way. The tide started to turn when the music business switched to digital. I think everybody then in the general media started to worry legitimately that these goofballs at these .com sites might actually become the sports journalism business. And I think when that started to happen, honestly, it was just I think we just kind of outlasted almost everybody. And I give you a lot of the credit because I think that you always have cared about the quality of the work, whether one person read it or a million. It didn't make any difference to you. And I think that in the end, that the quality of your work and your commitment, basically, it not only brought respect among the Vanderbilt community, but it brought a lot of respect in the general media and certainly around Vanderbilt University and folks like John Ingram, who really grew to believe that we cared a lot about the work that we were doing, not just Vanderbilt, but we cared about the quality of the work we were doing.
The professional.
And I think, we were going to do it professionally, whether we had one person or none. It didn't make any difference to us. And I think you deserve a lot of credit for that.
Well,
you do, Chris.
Well, thank you. And by the way,
you had a vision and your professionalism and your kindness, your approachability. People might not have known who you were, or it might have felt that way, but people learned to know you very quickly because of you kept a steady line that I think was definitely essential to any of it working.
By the way, I hope our audience doesn't think I'm being rude to Jesse. His mic is really low on my end, so sometimes it takes me a little while to hear you.
And I'm like 1,500 miles away, so.
That's fair.
Well, I mean, you guys and John Ingram is a name that you brought up. John is really the guy that I credit with getting me to the point where I can do this. I don't do this full time because every week I'm working on other stuff. I have some other jobs in sports journalism, sometimes outside that altogether, but we get paid by subscriptions and by sponsorships. None of us have ever drawn a salary, so everything that we built, and I mean, I'm the only guy at the business now of the three of us, but I know I wouldn't be there if it hadn't been for you guys as well. But I'm glad that you brought up John Ingram. It took him and some other people that support us and believed in us, and guys like Tim Corbin who were nice to us and it gave us access when we were figuring it out at the time. But it was amazing to me that at some point, I guess it was 2007 with baseball and maybe when the football team finally went to a bowl game, that it felt like we finally got some traction, and you realize maybe there are people reading this that you would never think are reading this. Jesse, was there a time where you feel like it sort of started to take off for us?
It was around 2007. That's really when it felt like it really started to take off everywhere. I mean, especially all three of the sports. If you think about it, even basketball, then they were, I believe, wasn't it? I'm trying to remember everything correctly, but the basketball team, I think Shane Foster was still on the team at that time, or it might have been right after Shane, but it was kind of like 2007 because, Vanderbilt, the football team almost went to a bowl game. They failed, but then they did the next year. Of course, the baseball team kept rising and rising. And also with the recruiting, that also was seemingly taking off a little bit more, just because I think one thing that Mike was touching on about things going digital, another thing that really happened that I think really helped us and a lot of people that do the online content, especially in sports writing, is social media evolving into what it became or what it is now. Because if you think back on it, it was MySpace back in like 2005, 2006, I can't even, Live Journal, something like that, Blogger was maybe your social media. Then Twitter came out, Facebook came out, and the smart people that were on the .com sites, embraced that stuff and really, connected with the audience that way too. And I think that's something, because a lot of newspapers were kind of slow to do that. And I think that's another way that things also helped our growth, was also just kind of some timing of it, and Vanderbilt's success, and us getting into a groove as a team. Also, because by 2007 we had been really working together for about 3 years. So I think that's when it felt like everything was really gearing up. And of course, it almost fell apart, when Bobby Johnson retired and all that stuff. But luckily, James Franklin came around.
I'm going to go into the mailbag because we've got a lot of questions to touch on, and I'm just going to hit this now. Our mailbag is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan Josh Minton, an independent insurance agent operating out of Brentwood. If you're looking for a one-stop shop to take care of your insurance needs, Josh has you covered. Call him today, 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Twitter at Joshua Minton HQ, or Facebook at facebook.com/JD Minton HQ. He's my insurance agent. Give him a try. Tell him you heard about it here. Dorfan asks us our highlight and lowlight of covering Vanderbilt athletics. Jesse, I'm going to start with you and let you give your answer.
Well, highlight of covering, the highlight of covering was actually kind of the end of our, it was right near the end of our business partnership. Actually, it was when obviously Vanderbilt baseball won the national championship in 2014. That was the huge highlight. I wish I could have been in Omaha to see that, but I obviously helped cover and everything like that. So that was very exciting. Low point was, something that happened back in 2012 football season that kind of almost ripped us apart at that moment, which was, me admittedly getting a little bullied by somebody with some power, and, actually not knowing what to do, and it caused some internal turmoil between us. But once again, our professionalism prevailed, and we were able to get past it. That's the highlight and the low point to me.
Mike?
Oh man, so many high points. I mean, I
Mike, for the low.
Yeah, no, I won't do that. I would say, the times that we covered the SEC basketball tournament, particularly in Atlanta, were really fun. I always loved covering the baseball tournament in Hoover. There's so, obviously, them winning national championship in baseball was almost, it is completely surreal that happened. Mostly I think it's the and you, Chris, you and I continue to talk about this. It's the 2:00 in the morning, moments when you're sitting there eating chips and Coke, and you're trying to file a story and try to go through 1,000 photographs to find 3 that are in focus. And, those moments are really priceless. The few times when you catch lightning in a bottle, some of the folks that we worked with, Brett Haight being one of them, Jimmy, another one, they deserve to be mentioned. We had so many fun times working together. Pardon me?
Oh, I was just going to say, I was going to mention Jeff Lockridge. Also, he was great.
Jeff, for sure.
Maurice Patton was great to work with. That was the thing. I always felt we got good support from our immediate contemporaries or whatnot, even though they were in the more established business. That was a very good thing for us too, I believe.
Yeah, and
I think that Brett, for sure. Brett always respected
Brett
us
was awesome
as journalists, and also we were good friends. I mean,
and he was a great friend too.
Going to the Sweet 16 at the Meadowlands was, okay, Jeff Green he did travel. I mean, let's just say it right now. I have the photographs to prove it. He did travel.
Yes, he did.
But, people don't know this, Chris, but, at that point, Brett had never been to New York City. And the three of us, went to New York City and went to Manhattan. And that's when Brett started taking pictures. That trip was when he started to think maybe he'd like to take pictures for more than just goofing around. Funny. One of my funniest stories, you probably remember this. We shoot on media cards, so we had SD media cards, and I have many times had media cards go through the laundry, but they're hard media, so it doesn't hurt the media. So Brett, the three of us go to Manhattan, and Brett takes all these photographs of Manhattan, and we go to dinner after we come back, and for some reason, he had handed me his camera. I guess he'd handed me his camera to look at some of his photographs. And I popped this media card out and handed it to him. And it slipped out of my hand. When he grabbed it, fell into a glass of water.
Yes.
He almost threw me out of the place. I said, dude, it's okay. The photographs are fine. And he was so mad at me. And then, of course, he dried it off and popped it into his camera. And the photos were still on the card, of course, but those are the things that are fun. I mean, being able to capture moments in sports photography is a thrill that is really not like anything else that I've ever done in my career. It's just a very unique experience to look down and see that you've captured a split second that you didn't even know you captured, like Mario Moore hitting that half-court buzzer beater against Oregon that ended up on the back page of the city paper thanks to Brett. Those things are really fun. I mean, being there when Shane Foster had his senior night performance, let's be honest, 100 years from now, people will talk about that game. There'll be 100,000 people that were at that game by that point. We were there.
Chris, were you there on that one, Chris? Did you have to?
I was on my honeymoon, getting the flu in Jamaica.
That's right.
Being as sick as I had been in 20 years.
Yeah, I remember. I do remember that night very, very well. It was pretty magical, as they say. But
man,
when I saw Mike later in the press room going through all the photos, it was like also moments like that. You were so excited to get that coverage out. You were so excited to get the photos, get the story up, get some talk going, because sports can be very exciting, can be very thrilling, because it's a clear cut decision. You either win or lose. So the competitive.
Well, you either have the photograph or you don't too.
Yeah, exactly, and that was another thing about Mike. Mike would get some great photos. He would get those photos in a moment that I don't think any other photographers usually around there would get, especially in basketball. He also got some great football photos. Mike,
I want to see if you can remember this.
I always say you just shoot a lot of photographs. That's the secret. You just take 1,000 to get 400 in focus. Everybody thinks I'm joking, but I'm really not joking. That really is the secret of sports photography, is taking a lot of photographs.
I remember very clearly. I'll see if you remember this. I won't name the player, but I remember you sent me an email one day with a photo, and it says, "I think I know what this guy is struggling." And you had several photos of him being passed the ball, and every time the ball would make its way towards him and he was about to catch, he had his eyes shut.
Oh yeah. The cameras that we shoot with can take 6 to 8, frames a second. So literally, most of the time you're taking pictures of things that you don't even know you're taking pictures of. I remember Jeff, who's a linebacker from North Carolina that played at Vandy, who had that terrible knee injury. Jeff no.
Jeff Daniels or Jeff? Was it the one from the Auburn game?
Yeah,
is that the one you're talking about?
Yes, I ended up leaning over the sideline and shooting up the sideline and got the exact moment when his knee got hit from the side. And the trainer asked me for a copy of the photograph because he said it was the worst knee injury he'd ever seen. I didn't plan to take that. I didn't plan to take that. That's the thing about sports photography. When you're shooting, you're just as surprised as everybody else is. Usually that you captured something spectacular. It truly is about having really good equipment, being able to anticipate where something might happen, and then just taking a ton of photographs. I mean, you guys know how many photographs I'd sort through, stupid media rooms trying to find, the right shots. It's just a matter of volume, honestly. It really is. It was fun, though.
Your shots of when Myron Lewis picked off that had the final interception against Auburn in 2008. I remember.
Yeah, that was interesting.
In the end zone. Yeah, and then he got his celebration right after, and that was one of my favorite photos to use that whole season. It was just like I'll just put that in every story I can because it was perfect.
Yeah, I mean, also being on the sidelines down there, you have not only do you have literally a different view of the game, but you actually experience a different aspect of the game because you're down there on the benches, around the benches, and you're also on both sides. So you hear the trash talk from the other side too. I remember an Auburn cheerleader had trash talked me directly before that game, got in my face, a male cheerleader got in my face about how, pathetic Vanderbilt was, and I was happy to wish him a good ride home after the game. It is a weird experience to be down on the sidelines. I'm grateful for the opportunity I had to do it. It's definitely it was definitely a lot of fun for sure. Long hours, very, very long hours, but a lot of fun for sure.
I think the best memories I have are just the people we met. I mean, there were highlights for I think the 07 regional. This is probably not going to be a popular answer. Is one of the favorite things I've ever covered, just because it was a moment where they had sort of arrived, even though they really didn't in a way for 7 more years. Not like they have now in baseball, but that was such a great event. There was such drama. It was so improbable. It's something I'll never forget. The crowd was electric. But, I mean, the friendships and relationships, not just the ones that we had. I mean, that was always one of my favorite things. I always said that I don't know that the time in some ways we put into it was worth it. Certainly wasn't financially, but the relationships we made. I've made so many friends through the site. I remember we talked about you dropping Brett's card in his water. New York Door took us out for dinner that night in New York. We're eating cheeseburgers. I cannot remember the name of the place now. He's going to kill me for not knowing that. But, we've had dinner with Bill Kay and guys like that just have always been so kind and gracious to us. John Ingram at times. And just the people at Vanderbilt. I mean, yeah, there were times that I know me in particular, I've pissed people off over there. And you've got to maintain your professional distance at your job, and you can't let that get in the way. But in a way, you are also a part of the community. You see a lot of the same guys in the press box, the Kevin Collins, the Brock Williams, the guys like that I just, I would chat at dinner for 5 minutes there and 20 minutes there. And over the years, that added up to hours and hours and hours. But that was the one thing I always have appreciated that about that community. And I think that's what has always upset me the most about just the way they threw the towel in on commitment the last 4 or 5 years at times with facilities and all the nonsense that we were hashing. It's just like I liked and respected so many of the people. And by the way, Tim Corbin would certainly be at the top of that list too. I just always felt those people deserved better. But I just think it was, to me, the relationships were always the thing that I think has made it worth it. Not just us, but with the subs. And I think my best moment, probably one of the things as a journalist I'll never forget, is I was talking to David Clymer a few years ago, and he just approached me out of the blue. And I'd met David, but honestly, I didn't know that David even knew who I was. But David came up to me and talked to me and said, man, I have so much respect for the work and the way that you guys do your jobs. And I'd read David's stuff for years, and always liked and respected him as a writer, and as I got to know him later as a person. But to me, that was kind of the moment I felt like we had arrived.
Yeah. Yeah. I experienced some of the similar things too from other people. Dave Beauclair, so some people just in the industry that you're kind of like, wow, do you even know who I am? In a way, but yeah, that was another thing that was very, very, very fun about doing it was the message board, was the community, was the subscribers, the members. And they still are. That's why, I come back sometimes just to see how things are going, because even when they would hate me or I'd hate them or they'd hate Mike or Mike would hate them or whatever, it was still, it was still kind of a brother sisterhood type thing in a sense. It kind of was like a family. And I think that's another reason why a lot of this stuff is still going strong. These entities, this content generated business.
I think the best part about running a site is message board communities. I think the worst part about running a site is message board communities.
There's no doubt about that. Yeah, I would agree. I honestly got to the point where I had to step out of it because I just couldn't keep. I couldn't let it. I just couldn't let things go. My own immaturity. I finally just thought better of myself to just walk away. How many times did you and I talk, Chris, at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or midnight or 1 a.m, trying to talk each other off of our respective ledges related to, things that just went from innocent to nuclear on a message board situation. Yeah, it got to be less fun for me when that started to become normal. I think it was mostly kind of a perfect storm of, we got to be pretty big, honestly. The ratio of people personality wise, got to be big. And frankly, there were things happening at Vanderbilt that were controversial that I think we always felt responsible to tell the truth, even though it was, the crazy thing is the truth was very often not what our own subscribers wanted to hear. There was I think you would still agree with that, Chris. It's still this weird culture that says, it's okay. You may be telling the truth, but I don't want to hear it from you. And I don't think we ever really liked that. I don't think we ever got used to that. I don't think we ever should get used to that.
No. Yeah. That was. I remember obviously the football rape case. That whole thing. How people were trying to get us to get more involved in a legal procedure. To what do you know? And it's like, we're not going to do that. That's something we can't enter. But we can tell you stuff that's going on behind the scenes of the basketball program. Well, I don't want to hear that. So that was something that was sometimes a big issue, both on the site and off the site, having to deal with.
Mike, I know you and I in particular did not enjoy so much of the Kevin Stallings era, just because there was, I don't even know where to start.
I don't know where to start. I don't really know where to end. I don't think ultimately it was about us. I think it's just Kevin is Kevin. And I don't think he treated us any differently than he treated everybody else. And I don't say that to be mean. I'm just saying that's just his personality. And, it was unfortunate to spend so many hours and days and weeks and months and even years down there and to never even have a modicum of a conversation with him about anything. How many years did we cover that program with him? I had more conversations with Eric Bakich standing on first baseline waiting for a commercial timeout to come back than I did with Kevin in the whole time that he was at Vanderbilt. And I don't say that to be mean. It was just his personality, and it was unfortunate. He made the work harder than it needed to be, in my opinion.
I never said more than 2 words to Kevin Stallings the whole time we covered the program, other than maybe asking a question here or there at a press conference. But he knew exactly who I was, and, his assistants wanted and saw, what, good, quality coverage of recruiting could do for them. And it was just crazy how they had to do it behind his back to kind of talk to us and, kind of establish a, kind of a relationship of at least, basically all in recruiting, something that everybody should know, no matter which line of journalism it is. And if you're covering sports recruiting, you have to have contacts on the inside. So everybody does. There's nothing, bad about it or whatnot. But, I was able to establish some relationships with some assistant coaches purely behind the back of their head coach, because had he known that they were dealing with anybody in the media, even something that could potentially be to their benefit in a way, just more coverage, more talk, more positivity around the program, he would have nixed it immediately. That was just his personality. He was his way, and it had to be his way. And, it was not always pleasurable. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think
Kevin was the victim of the changing tide in journalism in general, because when he first got to Vanderbilt, there was really no such thing as recruiting coverage outside of Bob Gibbons and his 800 line, he was awesome. I mean, I can't tell you how much money I wasted doing that. But as times changed, his assistant coaches are the ones that had to, drag their rear ends out on the road and try to get these kids to show an interest in Vandy. And it was becoming increasingly more difficult for guys like Dan Cage and other guys to be able to do their jobs when there was no coverage of the kids. And Kevin, I think, just really resented that needed to be the way that he refused to accept it, really, is what it boils down to. But Dan Muller and those guys knew better. And at the end of the day, I think we did a pretty good job, honestly. I think we did a great job, considering the constant, lack of whatever, even just general respect, common decency that we got from Kevin, not from the staff. The staff was terrific. I mean, Tom Richardson's terrific.
And Andy was great, the SID. There were people that were working around or for Kevin Stallings that were great, and just unfortunately the coach at times and it's not being negative toward him, that's just how he was. Necessarily, he did some things that I didn't agree with that people probably don't know about. But anyway, it was so crazy how we could get real good contacts, especially with baseball, especially with football, and we could even get contacts with basketball, and we could get support from all their, information directors and assistants and people in the over at McGugin, but from him, nothing.
Well, again, I never really took it personally. I just think I don't think Kevin really treated anybody any differently, and I don't think he saw it as being rude. I think he just saw it as the way he was running the program, and at Vanderbilt, the coaches determine how they're going to run their program. It's exactly. There isn't a lot of this is the way we do things across the board. At least there wasn't when I was involved. It was, hey, if Tim wants to invite you over to his house for barbecue, then that's awesome. But don't expect Kevin to say hello to you in the hallway. I mean, literally, don't expect him to say hello. And you kind of had to be able to roll with the punches on that stuff, which I guess we did. We certainly had some tough times. There's no doubt. I mean, had some very difficult times.
a football coach calling you at 3 o'clock in the morning right after a win and complaining about how a story was written. That was definitely interesting. I'm sure that might be in the mailbag.
Yeah, that's the next one. We'll start
He had
here
to
and we'll
go
work to
there.
that.
He went there.
Segue.
He went there.
Yeah, okay. We'll get back to that later, but let's go to this one. Raiders 1967. If the Gillette incident never occurs, what could the 2013 season have been? Could Vanderbilt have beaten Ole Miss and South Carolina had a 10-win regular season? Jesse, I'll let you hit that one.
Yeah, I think it was very, 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 very possible it could have happened. I mean, just think about that team, and think about some of the games that they did lose, that they very well could have won. And I know they won some games that they were maybe fortunate to win, but that's football, that's sports in general. But that team is going to always go down as one of the better teams, and considering what they went through, leading up to that, and is very bad time, very pins and needles time, and everything, and very taxing on people that were either involved or somehow associated with it, or even people like us that had to cover it. But the season, that team could have definitely. I think that team could have possibly played in a New Year's Day bowl for sure, and possibly could have won 10 games had obviously the ball bounced a couple of ways differently, and having Chris Boyd would have been a good asset for that team as well.
Vandy Stud, and this is probably where I should have started. Tell us the real inside story of your relationship with James Franklin. Mike, I'm going to let you start this one, and I know Jesse will have plenty to add. To me, it all started... Didn't start, but I still think back to that dinner... or the lunch the three of us had with James at Bricks that day. I know you remember that one pretty well, Mike. Mike, I think you might have your mute on.
Do you really want me to talk about it?
I mean, he's like, no, I want it on mute. I was just considering
that's the most quiet I've ever heard you, Mike.
Yeah. Well, let me just say, Chris and Jesse both heard me say this, and Chris and I talked about this today. Despite everything, James, if James listens to this, he'll probably fall out of his seat in shock. But I think James is a underrated football coach. People think that he's a rah-rah guy. He's a motivator. Pardon my French, but that guy is one hell of a football coach. He knows how to win football games. And, he talked about money plays all the time. That guy knew, he had an instinct for when to run plays, and he was willing to fail. I think that's what separated him, ironically, from all the other Vanderbilt football coaches before him. He's a lot like Corbin, in that he was really not interested in just being pretty good. He was interested in kicking somebody's ass.
Yeah,
and he was going to run.
Sorry, Mike.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Jesse.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead. Well, I was just going to add.
I was going to say
what you were saying is, James, and unlike Bobby, who I still respect, Bobby Johnson a lot. I think he did a lot for the program, but unlike Bobby or I guess Woody did take some chances. The thin margin that they saw to win, they usually would play the conservative route, whereas James said, "Screw that! I'm gonna keep. I'm gonna take risk. I'm gonna take this because what do I have to lose?" And that's
I think James was like, just like hell. Anybody can lose. I mean, I'm not gonna go out of here not trying to win. And I don't think he was afraid of losing. I think, with all due respect, I think previous football coaches were afraid to make those plays for fear they'd get blamed for losing a game. And James never cared. I mean, he was willing to make mistakes, and because he knew that if he wasn't playing that way, he wasn't going to win. And frankly, he does the same thing at Penn State. I mean, he doesn't call any differently than he did here. He plays the same way at Penn State. I think most people would be surprised to hear me say that, but he is a hell of a football coach. I mean, that guy could win anywhere. And I have a lot of respect for him as a football mind. He is as good as there is in the game, period. That said, his view of what we do for a living or did for a living was, something I didn't agree with. So, he had no problem flat out just saying, you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. And there's a limit to that when you're a journalist. There's a limit to how far you can go with that.
Yep.
And I wasn't willing. I remember saying to him I remember saying, he kept kind of inching his way closer and closer to the line of this conversation that we didn't want to have. And I said, James, let me just be clear. I'm going to be here long after you're gone. And the people that I work around here, the people that I know, the people that trust me, they're going to have to trust me after you're gone from here. So I'm sorry if that means that you and I can't be the kind of relationship that you think you need to be successful. I said, but that's just not how the game is played here. And he said, I know how the game is played. And, he does know how the game is played. I mean, he is a great football coach. And I have a lot of respect for him still showing up and supporting Vanderbilt athletics, particularly Tim. And, I have a lot of respect for James, a lot of respect for him. I didn't agree with his approach to journalism, particularly as it related to us. And I still don't agree with it. I think there's a line you can't cross. And I think he purposefully pushed us to the very edge of that line. And I didn't appreciate it. And I still don't. But then again, I would be among the people least surprised that he's had success at Penn State. I think he could go coach the Dallas Cowboys and be successful. He is one of the best football coaches in the game, period.
Jesse, you knew him better than any of us did. I'm just going to give you the floor with wherever you want to go with this, because I think you understood him better than the rest of us.
Yeah. The thing, like Mike was saying, was it was very clear. James is obviously, he is a motivator. He is he has a can't say that word right half the time. He has a background in studying people. We'll just say, he has a psychology degree. Sorry. He knows how to work people. He's like a professional wrestling manager. People know I love professional wrestling. He's like one of those guys. He's like Bobby the Brain Heenan. He knows how to get things out of people that benefits him and whatnot. And that's what he wanted to do with us, is he wanted to be able to control us as though we worked for him. And usually I would have to be the person that would have to tell him. And sometimes, I kind of hinted at it earlier when I talked about the darkest time at VandySports. There was like one or two times where I was just like, okay, I'll try to do something to appease you, like edit my co-partner's story because you didn't like how it was, which still is one of the things I most regret, that I even did that, and I've apologized to Chris for that a couple of times, but I'll do it again on air. That's just something that you just don't do. But I did it for that moment. It was so tedious and stupid, and just that was the side of James that was very just hard to deal with at times. Now, there was a great thing about him as far as access, as far as just treating you with like you're one of the guys. I don't know how many times he butt slapped me during those 3 years at practice. He was a very media friendly guy. Very. James is he's not only a very good coach, but I think he's a very good person. Don't ever get me wrong. And I've tried to always explain that. I think he's a very good person on top of everything. It's just like all of us. He has his faults that he was going through, and he was a first-time head football coach. And, I don't know what's happened at Penn State. I still have people, that work for him up there that I still have somewhat of a relationship with and talk to every now and then. But, I'm pretty sure that he keeps his nose clean, legally and everything, because I think fans always thought that maybe that was something that I was not telling them, or I was not addressing or whatnot, or that was what my major strife with him was, and it wasn't. My major strife was he tried to manipulate me sometimes, not to get anything that was really illegal, like bad for Vanderbilt in a sense, like with the NCAA, but he wanted to do something bad for Vanderbilt as control the very media source that is already in his, is already, as professional as we are, we're benefited when Vanderbilt succeeds. So we're already wanting to see them succeed because fans are happy, subscriptions, stay up, more readers come, everything's nice when you win. And he definitely won. But he had a very bad control issue that just, that was the thing that kind of made it not so exciting, even though, we're watching Vanderbilt win 9 games in back-to-back seasons, which is something just, no one had seen in, 100 years at that school. So it's always, when I think of those 3 years, it's kind of bittersweet in a way because it's very fond memories, but at the same time, it's also kind of like, man, but there was some times where I really hated doing the job because of kind of the way James was and kind of the strife that kind of happened between us, for that one incident that I referenced. And I don't know. That's all I'll say about that, as Forrest Gump would say. And since I've talked to James over social media and everything, and everything's cool. There's no hating James Franklin from me. I'm just real with everybody, especially since I'm not in the industry anymore. So that's kind of how it was.
Yeah, one more question, and Jesse, I'm going to let you answer this. This is also from Raiders 1967. If Gillette never happens, is it possible James stays if Vanderbilt tries to match or exceed the Penn State compensation package as it apparently attempted to do?
There's a very...
I'll say...
James... Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jess. No, go ahead.
Well, James definitely liked Vanderbilt. He definitely liked the education aspect. He loved bringing up the degree, what the graduates make. Just he loved Vanderbilt's. He loved what he could promote at Vanderbilt. And of course, like every football coach, every fan at times, the things that they love that they can promote when it, kind of bites them on the butt and they try to get in the kid. Then they don't like it, So he was like everybody else. That would happen too. But I think, James would have stayed longer because he had a very good recruiting class coming in. He'd already had a couple of good classes that he had while he was here. He definitely would have stayed. I think had things not happened with the the incident, obviously. I will say that Penn State was one that would come calling that would be difficult, but James always liked being he loved using the underdog mentality too, and he loved being, kind of like, let's do something different, which is something he definitely did when he was at Vanderbilt, and he's kind of done that at Penn State, but Penn State is Penn State, so I think he definitely. I can't say I think he definitely, more than likely he would have stayed had things not happened the way they did.
Jesse, how bad did it get between he and Nick Zeppos?
They didn't talk. I know they didn't really talk at all. Obviously James had a very good relationship with David, but Zeppos, as well as I can't remember some of these people's names. People that James did want some concessions. He wanted some things to, especially since they were winning and they were still graduating kids and stuff. He wanted some things, and Zeppos was gonna say it in the media, but didn't wasn't always gonna do it behind closed doors. So especially not if he couldn't get some more donors to help. And that 2013 incident, that summer, at the end of that summer, that caused a pretty big strife because James wanted things a certain way, and I know that a couple of people were really put off by that over there too. So I don't know, maybe what I said earlier, maybe it wouldn't have actually just been matter of fact. Yeah, he probably would have signed a max contract and been at Vanderbilt for another 5 or 6 or 10 years. Maybe that wouldn't have happened now that I think about it. But the relationship with him and Zeppos was not good when he left. Not good at all. There was almost no relationship, period.
Okay, Tommy Dorr has one for you, Mike. Do you think that David Williams delivered on the expectations he stated early on when you interviewed him?
In what respect?
That was the question. It's pretty wide open, so however you would like to answer it. You sound like a lawyer all of a sudden.
Well, yeah. David Williams was a lawyer, and he liked controlling the conversation, and he knew how to control the conversation in a way that gave you the answers that you wanted, but didn't actually answer any of the questions that you were asking him. Mm-hmm. He was an interesting guy. I think he changed a lot over the years. When Gordon Gee was there, I think he felt they had both come from Ohio State. I remember him telling me the first year that he was there that Vanderbilt didn't go to a bowl game. I remember him telling me his son, who, I don't know, probably 6 years old, cried because it was the first time in his entire life that he hadn't had a team that went to a bowl game. I remember David being really affected by that. I think he felt a lot of responsibility for Vanderbilt University. And I think his goals for Vanderbilt changed over the years. I think he got less and less interested in the fight. I think there were certain aspects. This isn't news to anybody. So I'm not revealing anything that would be controversial at all, but David just wasn't really interested in fundraising, which if you're an athletics director, that's in the Southeastern Conference, that's probably the biggest job you have, and David I think the longer he was there, the less interested he was in that. I think he got tired of the constant fight with money internally, and he just kind of walked away from it, really. And I think he enjoyed the successes that Vanderbilt had in athletics. I think he felt personally responsible for a lot of them. I know for a fact he spent a lot of his own personal money on things out of his own pocket, including things that sit at Hawkins Field and sit at McGugin that promote Vanderbilt that there wasn't money for, that he personally wrote checks for. He would never want anybody to know that. I just found out about some of it behind the scenes. Did he deliver? I would say in some things he probably did. In some things he didn't. He didn't.
Okay, Jake C4VU, first of all, has some nice words for you, Jesse. He says to let you know that the Vanderbilt community really loves you and has missed you. Ceci, I'll let you start with this, and then I'll let Mike answer. He says, my question is about the whole athletic department. You guys have covered Vanderbilt for over 15 years, have watched the most success the university's ever had unfold in that time. Expectations are now higher in every sport, it seems, and times are changing. What do you guys see the state of the Vanderbilt athletic department in another 15 years? I'd love to hear what facilities will look like, what programs took the next step, and where the programs stand next to SEC competition in 15 years.
Well, it's always tricky, especially from the football side. I think baseball and basketball is going to be fine, and I think I'm not sure exactly about Stackhouse just yet, like everybody else. I mean, he is a first-time coach, but I do believe that everything's. I like the Turner hire for that respect. I think the football program in particular, I think it has a very good chance to be even more competitive in the next 10 to 15 years. I think I've seen better scheduling for one. I think the scheduling has gotten a little bit better. Obviously, it got way better with James, but they kind of sacked it to Derek a little bit when he first came here. But I think it's gotten a little bit better. They've been very smart about picking and choosing some of the marquee games they've gotten, and then picking up some good games, like the Colorado State series. I think will be a good series for them. To answer the question just real quickly, I think that Vanderbilt's it's such a strange animal to what they're in, because I think facility-wise, there should be no question that the facility should always improve. Now, is it ever going to be competitive with most of the rest of the conference? Of course not. That's a reality, because they have more money, and they always have more money, and they have had more success for a longer period of time. But I see things that appear to be going in the right direction, and I think college football in particular is also working out for them. That transfer rule, the kind of some of the red tape that was in front of that going away now, I think is beneficial to Vanderbilt. Now it's also beneficial to the big dogs too, but I think it's definitely something that Vanderbilt is profiting on, as you can see with the preseason roster. And I think the climate of going to college, obviously, if you don't have a college degree, is becoming more and more a deterrent for you to have a successful, livelihood. So I think things are going in the positive direction. But as always, if they have a couple of seasons where they lose, basically almost all their games again, 2-10 or something like that, they're dealing with 120 something years of history, that it's just always going to be a challenge. But I think they're going in the right direction, but it's always going to be a challenge there. It's always going to be a challenge for any program like Vanderbilt. And I think most fans know that, and you can still be motivated every season, every school year to support your team. So I guess that answers the question. I don't know.
Mike, it's your turn.
Well, I think Vanderbilt is in a very good position in general as a university. It's they're in the Southeastern Conference, so there's always going to be residual that comes from that. They've done a really good job of benefiting from that for the most part. The fact that the basketball program became so terrible, in spite of all that, is shocking, beyond belief.
When you're just that completely blocked. When I left Nashville, right, I didn't think that we would already be talking about Drew being fired and them having a winless season. I mean, I definitely did not see that happening. I knew there was bad things infrastructure-wise with the basketball program when Kevin left, but what happened last year, I didn't see coming. So it is crazy that basketball is the number 3 right now.
I'm concerned about. That's all right. I'm concerned about women's basketball, and there was certainly a time in the 80s and 90s where basketball was always literally the least of your problems, and at the same time, I don't know. I'm not really worried about Vanderbilt athletics succeeding or not succeeding. I'm more interested in what I think is could happen in the future as it relates to the Southeastern Conference and really all of college athletics. It continues to push closer and closer to compensating student athletes financially. I think it's almost inevitable that it's going to go there. And I think when that happens, it's going to just necessitate a huge divide in how college athletics is split up. And people say, "Oh, Vanderbilt, will never leave the Southeastern Conference." That's almost certainly true, but the Southeastern Conference doesn't have to do anything. If Alabama and 5 or 6 other schools leave the Southeastern Conference, which is, unthinkable, right? I mean, you say that out loud and people just scoff. But if they left the Southeastern Conference, it would be the same thing as Vanderbilt leaving the Southeastern Conference. It would mean that, it would be a sea change. And I don't want to see that happen. Not just for Vanderbilt, but I don't want to see that happen for culture and for college football.
Yeah.
But the money part of it is getting so disproportionate that it almost feels inevitable because, it's just the money part of it is so disproportionately tilted toward football. I mean, it's no secret. College football funds the vast majority of the athletics departments out there that are at this level. And I just, I'm more, I guess I'm not worried about it, but I'm more intrigued by that aspect of it because I could see a scenario where it could change because of the money involved. Most schools just can't. Most schools, if you said, "Hey, you're going to have to give a stipend," you'd have to give a stipend to every single student athlete. Every single one. You couldn't just give it to football players, and you'd be doubling the budget.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, could UAB afford to do that?
Scenario? No. I could definitely see a scenario where the top 20 programs financially break off from the NCAA. People have been talking about it for about 10 years now, the super division or whatever, because, amateurism is increasingly going away, and I think it's even going away in high school sports to an extent with all the private schools becoming more and more powerful. So, yeah, I definitely think what you just said, Mike, is probably the thing that could be possibly not detrimental to Vanderbilt necessarily, because I've always said if Vanderbilt left the SEC or if they were in a different division, like the European soccer scenario that people talk about all the time, the Champions League, if that kind of thing happened, I think Vanderbilt would still be something to support because it would be across the board for most programs. Because most programs outside of the top programs are not that secure that they can just pay every single student athlete some type of stipend above, just their already, government stipend.
Yeah, there's no way. I mean,
who governs? Because when you start talking about a player's worth, it's just like with recruiting. And recruiting, something that I'm sure a lot of fans know about. In recruiting, you now have, promoters and guys that are like your handlers. That's become a thing more and more, and they're almost like agents, and some of them probably are agents. Look at the basketball.
Oh, for sure.
That's happening.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's inevitable that it's going to happen, and that's maybe the thing to think about. I think because it might not be, the SEC might not be what it is now in 15 years. There's a good chance it's not going to be. So, and the interest in the sport might go down because of that. I could say something. A lot of there's a number of people that are Vanderbilt alumni and fans that live on the West Coast. Coming here the last year and a half, it's crazy for USC and UCLA and even Stanford and everything. The interest is so minute compared to even Vanderbilt football interest.
Yeah, it's fallen off.
Exactly, and it's big to everybody in the South because of how big football's been. But the reality is especially the way the game's changing, with health concerns and concussions, there's a good chance that the whole game could be different in 15 years anyways. Vastly different.
Okay, Jesse, I'm going to throw this one to you. This is from Wolf D214. He says he wants to hear about the biggest almost commits. He said, I remember hearing a couple of potential signing day surprises that did not materialize. Would like to hear any interesting stories here.
Well, the biggest one to me always was Dante Hightower. They had him. Then, Alabama came and even after he committed to Alabama, it was still almost like a matter of fact that he was going to end up signing with Vanderbilt. He had established a real good relationship with Casey Hayward, who was also in that class, and some other recruits, and just everybody was just so sure that eventually he would do that. But I think it was his grandfather's wish was that he see him play at Alabama, and it ended up happening. And Dante had a great freaking career and still has a great career. He's probably one of the biggest ones because, everybody could see how great of an athlete he was, even when he was a sophomore in Marshall County. I'm trying to think of some people that were surprises. Almost. I was talking about Michael Eubanks a couple of days ago to my fiance. He was the quarterback when James came in. Oh, well, a big one obviously would have been the kid that went to Arkansas. I can't remember the quarterback's name now. He ended up not really being that great, but he would have been a big-time recruit had he came there. Sorry, I'm drawing a blank on his name right now. He was when Gus Malzahn almost got the job. He was going to come.
Kyle Frazier.
Yeah, Kyle Frazier. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and he did go to Auburn and everything. And Frazier was really didn't pan out, so that wouldn't have been that big of a deal. But it would have been a big deal in recruiting at that time, obviously. I'm trying to think right now. I'm sorry. I'm drawing a blank on some people. The quarterback out of Indiana that James basically had a commitment from twice, and then changed his mind to go to Notre Dame, and Connor Keel, I think was his name. Gunnar Keel. Keel. He would have been a big win, just again because of the media behind it, behind the buzz behind it, and everything. And James was pretty sure that he was going to get him, and then I think like a day or two before everything changed, he pretty much realized that it wasn't even Gunner's decision either time to where he was going to go. So I think he would have been another big one that was almost to happen.
Derek Barnett, there was some noise about him not long before signing day. I remember that, but I never knew how legit that was.
It was not that legit, really, because he didn't. I never really cared to talk about academics for anybody, and I'm still not really, even though I'm not in the business. But it just was going to be a tough fit, was what I was told, for him to actually be able to be accepted on time or whatnot. But there was a push kind of, midway through the end of his senior year for him to, stay in Nashville. And, James was really high on that. And it was close to happening, but not as much as it kind of blew up for like 24 hours that right near signing day. It wasn't that close.
Mike, do you remember our nonstop coverage of J.P. Prince?
J.P. Prince. Oh, God.
Yeah, I do.
It was crazy how much time we put into that.
Yeah, we got played pretty good on that.
Game too.
Yeah, we got played on that. That's kind of hacked me off mostly because I felt like rivals kind of, I don't know, that Arizona site was kind of a rogue site. That publisher was really, I don't know, he was not a very, well, I think he ended up getting fired. I think they actually took him off the network, but it was pretty clear there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes there that it was kind of a big show, really. I think he intended to go to Arizona all along. He just liked the media attention. So it's kind of fun to cover. We kind of got a lot of publicity out of it, but at the end of the day, it's kind of.
And then when he transferred and he was almost going to go to Vanderbilt, but then he got denied.
I know.
I know.
Yeah.
It's like, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is, like, that's kind of, when you look back on it now, you think, if you saw him, you would bet he's like, wow, he's a 6'7" super athlete, smooth, long. He didn't really he never really played better than his athleticism. He was not.
No,
he was not a great basketball player.
No, he was not a franchise guy. He did end up being a thorn in the side for Vanderbilt when he came to Tennessee a couple of times. But the thing with Prince is, I don't know if he would have ever really worked with Kevin. I think he would have been someone that would have transferred anyway.
Yeah, I agree.
He would have came in as a freshman because those personalities don't seem like they would have mixed that well.
No, not at all. No.
A lot of personalities on the basketball program didn't seem to mix well with Kevin, even the ones that were there all 4 years. So
that's for sure.
Mike, who was the big man they had from Arizona? The 4-star, the one that eventually had the health issue and quit. In fact, Vanderbilt saved his life. Yeah. Mike, do you remember trying to cover that recruitment?
I do, yeah. Yeah, it was weird. That whole thing was weird because he really was not a very good basketball player when you really got right down to it. But honestly, the kid probably wouldn't be alive today if he hadn't come to Vanderbilt. I mean, it's that situation changed the rules for athletics, period, across the board. Until Vanderbilt, by virtue of Vanderbilt Medical Center, had the training and the equipment to save that kid's life. And after that happened, it became mandated that every school had to have that. And it has saved kids' lives. It has saved kids' lives right there on the court. And it's one of the things that I look back on that really affected Kevin personally. I would say that senior night when Davis walked out on the court, I remember Kevin sobbing. That was a revealing moment to me. I remember that moment pretty vividly. To see that happen, I think all coaches have those moments if they coach long enough. I know Tim has certainly had his, but that was one that I remember very vividly from Kevin's time.
What I was getting at, and I don't mean to take it lighter, but I remember you calling me after you tried to call Davis the first couple of times, and you're like, man, his dad just basically read me the riot act through the phone. Do you remember this at all, or is this just these things happen so many times that you just forget them? But I remember we had a good laugh over that one.
I guess it's just.
Go ahead.
I mean, back then it was the Wild Wild West. I mean, honestly, in retrospect, I don't really. The three of us did things differently than a lot of sites did. And even though I don't like the way that we were treated, I understood it because after Jesse, you certainly know this. I mean, after you've had experiences with the loon from the Arizona site, you realize that, man, there are people out there that now, I don't think it's that way now, but back then there were people out there that were not trustworthy,
No.
Yeah,
there were a lot of people whose names will not be ever mentioned because it's just not right. But yeah, there was people in the industry that back then that were definitely not doing what they should. They were not following the code of ethics.
No, and had no intention of doing it either. I mean,
no, they didn't care. It was just a team site for them. It was just, they didn't even treat themselves as professionals anyway.
No, they would wear their school's, colors and cheer. They didn't care.
Literally,
and
one of the New Mexico State sites literally had their writer dressed in school face paint when he interviewed a kid.
I remember that.
Because I
that is awesome. you gotta give respect
to in the SEC for doing something.
In some ways, I kind of respect that more. I respect that more than the people that acted like they weren't partisan when you and we all knew damn well. I mean, they were doing these stories about recruits where you knew they were just almost lying about what was being done and said to get hits. It's just pathetic. I don't think it's that way now. I think
the story
is different.
The story
now.
of Nwankwo's father, what are you calling, and all this is, just going on after you. I mean, that's so much of what I experienced for the first couple of years, doing this, because you're calling, and again, I always had to think about it. I'm calling 16-year-olds.
Yeah, I know.
One man calling 16-year-olds to ask him about their college interests and, how their games and their preparation has been and all this other stuff. It's such a odd thing. I mean, I did it when I was in high school, but, doing it as a mature adult, it was a little weird. And that's why also sites like, or networks like, Rivals and the others, they were kind of ahead of the curve because they would go and do it. Whereas, most people like at the Tennessean or something like that, they're not going to call a kid and ask this. But there's a lot of awkward times, especially if you just kind of cold called people and you happen to get someone's phone number in the database that was not the right phone number. And you're interviewing the kid for 5-7 minutes and you realize it's not the player that you thought you were supposed to be interviewing. Not even in the same state.
Oh man.
That's
terrible.
Talk about being read on the face on the phone. I mean, that happened a number of times those first couple of years. And that's why me and a couple of people at Vanderbilt at football became very close and very good friends, because I didn't want to call people that I didn't know and ask them, I didn't want to call, moms and say, can I talk to your son about his future? I didn't want to do that, and it'd be so embarrassing. So I was like, who is it that you really like and who is it that you really want? Okay, I'll call them and see what they think about you. That's and Vanderbilt was smart enough, certain people were smart enough to say, hey, you can interview them and find out what if you're at the Ole Miss site, you're probably going to ask more questions about their interest in Ole Miss than you are in Vanderbilt, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
exactly. So I'm going to ask them a couple more questions about Vanderbilt than I am their other side. The thing is I wouldn't sugarcoat people and be like, oh yeah, because he said those couple of sentences, that are highlighted in the article, that means he's coming to Vanderbilt. No, I tried to balance it out and be like, no, he also said this about this school and it's about that school. That's what a lot of people in the industry were not doing, which you were referring to, Mike. They were doing that and some other things that was really misleading and just not professional. And I'm glad that we never approached that kind of stuff.
I'm sitting here thinking, it's like, I think what kept us all in it for so long together is I think you had to have a sense of humor. Just all the ridiculous stuff that happened at certain points. Jesse, do you remember? And I think Mike was with us too. The time we just about, I thought we were about 2 seconds from getting in a fist fight with the food guys at the SEC tournament in 07.
Yeah. Yeah, because of you and he didn't want to give you and Brett or you or Brett a role or something.
Well, what it was, okay, you go
like a Nazi about it.
You go to these events and you have people in charge who take themselves not a little too seriously, but like a lot too seriously. Mike, were you there for this, or was it just me and
Mike
Brett?
Was there.
Yeah, I thought Brett.
Mike was there.
I thought Brett was going to have a heart attack. Brett Haight from just laughing so hard at this. I just made a comment like they took their role way too seriously, and I made a comment. I don't even remember what I said. But like, hey, the world's not going to end if we get a sandwich, Yeah, and then the guy.
Oh, I remember this.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember this now.
And then the guy who's probably 60, he's just a food handler, threatens to kick me out of the SEC tournament.
Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah.
And then I got mad, and Jesse got mad, and it just, I
just thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, I think once we'd all calmed down, we had a good laugh about it, but I thought Jesse was going to go.
Yeah, I was just so offended by someone being so rude to you for no reason. I was just like, what is that about? And I just
Do you remember that dude?
I was a little younger than you guys, so I had a little bit more spit and fire in me, so.
Nobody was afraid of me. Do you remember that dude? Do you remember that dude that was like the media? He was an Ole Miss guy.
Yes, that's where I was going next. He had a fascination with where your feet were in relation to the baseline at the SEC, and he kept coming over and over and over and over and telling you that your foot was 2 millimeters over the line, and if you didn't get with the program, he was kicking you out. That kind of thing. It was Langston. What was the guy's name? Yeah,
Cranston something.
I can't remember his name. But he
honestly,
at that tournament.
People think you're exaggerating, but you're not. I mean, he literally would position himself over in the media area where the press was sitting, so he could see down the damn sidelines to watch people's toes to make sure they weren't on the line. It was like Barney Fife, and I started laughing. And then he really got pissed at me when I started laughing at him. He said, "You don't think this is funny? You're not going to think it's funny when I kick you out of here." I mean, everybody, all the photographers were just laughing. I found out later that people that are like that. He's just always had that Barney Fife kind of thing. But there's a lot of those kinds of people around those events, and really around college athletics in general. There's always somebody that wants to find somebody to make an example of, to nip it in the bud. And those were, after a while, you just learn to kind of roll your eyes and laugh at that kind of stuff and not take it too seriously. Oh boy, I tell you, those are the kinds of things where you just kind of go, really, really, do I look like a threat to you? I mean, I'm like, at the time, it's probably 160 pounds soaking wet. You really think I'm a threat? I will say this. I mean, now that we're talking about that, I think that was the year. And Mike Strasinger, if he's listening to this, would be able to tell you that was, I think, the year that an official, Crawford, fell on the court. He was backing up by the photographers. It was during a media timeout, and he accidentally stepped on Mike Strasinger's foot.
Oh,
and he collapsed on the court. We thought he was dead. We thought he'd had a heart attack and died right in front of us. But apparently the pain was so great that he passed out. And here we are in a media timeout.
He had a foot surgery before that too.
Mike, I mean, and I'm telling you right now, it was just an unfortunate situation because, we were not over that line, by golly. But he stepped backwards and stepped on Mike's foot and collapsed on the court, and it was petrifying. I mean, I literally thought thought we were looking at a dead guy, honestly. And ever since then, for years, Mike would, whenever that guy did a game, we would talk about that event. Those are the weird things that happen most people don't know about, that you remember so vividly.
Exactly.
We've still got a couple more questions, but I think we've hit most things, and we're 2 hours in. This is the longest podcast I've ever done, and we need to wrap it up just for our sake. But I want to give you guys, I want to give you guys the floor, starting with Jesse, just to close with any thoughts or any stories you wanted to share that we didn't get to before we end.
There's so many stories. I'm just going to think about the positive ones. Some of the families, the parents of some of these players, and there were some that were just, they were very they were very unique to deal with, and I know most of the people on the site can guess who I'm referring to, but I won't name names. But they're getting emails and getting ran down while you're at practice, and then basically hijacking the whole practice. You can't even watch what's going on because they keep talking to you, telling you how wrong you are about how good their son is or isn't, or something like that. Really, I said it before, the message board has so many little inside jokes that everybody would come up with. The townies versus I can't even think of it now, the townies versus the
Gownies.
Yeah, the Gownies versus the Townies, that kind of stuff is hilarious. Some of the groups of people on the site, and then just the extended fan base, I will say the guys from Vandy Gold, all of them, Dan Stockton, the Whistler, Jeff, everybody. I read the article about I can't think of his name right now, but I read the article right before the national championship game, and it actually brought a tear to my eye, just because of crap. I can't remember his name right now, but just those people, just so welcoming. Bruce was one. Dealing was enjoyable to deal with.
Yeah.
Just how there's a lot of unique people in the fan base, that's for sure, and that's something I really miss. Just on a Saturday or, at a baseball game, just they see you like, hey, what's up? How are you gonna, and then someone getting your face, what's going on? What's the top 10 kids that Vanderbilt wants right now? Who are they going to get? Just getting grilled right there, like, hey, say hello to my fiance, so stuff like that. Other memories, 2008, the football team finally going to a bowl game. That's a personal memory to me, when they beat Kentucky, because I was, near my dad at the time, who would go on to pass away just like a year and a half later. And we had like a father-son high five, which was just something we hadn't done since I was like in Little League. So that was a unique moment in my life. My experience. There's just so many of them, I can't even list them. I will though. I'll give you a top 30 and post it on the board. I'll give you one of my epic, 10-page novel posts that I
man,
Vandy Hunter.
man.
Yeah, if anybody could do that, it would be you. Mike, your turn.
Well, I mean, I think it's first of all, knowing that the two of you had such a good time doing it is it means a lot to me personally. I think we knew that we were onto something. I don't think, frankly, the three of us individually and collectively had no business professionally, based on our experience, growing into the things that we got to do. And I think knowing that you guys had so much fun and had so many great life moments during that stretch means a lot to me personally. Really proud of both of you. I would say for me, we didn't talk about this earlier, Chris, but the Marcus Dixon situation kind of made me realize that we could maybe have something different, do something unique. For those of you who are listening, I'm not going to go into the details, but look up Marcus Dixon and Brian Gumbel and watch that. Brian Gumbel, by the way, still says that's one of the 10 best stories they ever covered on his show, Real Sports. I think that was probably a moment where I thought, what we're doing actually might make a difference and might be meaningful to people beyond just asking some Billy Bob what his top 5 schools are. For me, being able to become a sports photographer and now have a career in creative, a lot of the things that I learned around YouTube, has helped me do that. And I'm grateful for sure. I'm grateful for the opportunities that I had to be exposed to so many things I had never even imagined before. And so that's getting to be good friends with Jimmy, certainly a life thing for me. Brett, Tommy, Henry Nichols, who has been a terrific friend to me since then. Just a lot of really good people. And I would say that it all goes back to you, Chris, because you treat people with respect and care. I think it's part of who you are. I don't think you have a dishonest bone in your body. You would work as long and as hard as it took to do the right thing. I could count the number of people that I would say that about on one hand in my whole life, and lucky beyond belief that I've gotten to be friends with you and had the chance to work with you. And I think everything that we accomplish and everything you continue to accomplish is because of that. And I'm, couldn't be happier for you. And frankly, everybody that gets to be around you and get the benefit of your work. It's, you're a unique guy, and Jesse is too. And I'm grateful we had that chapter together.
I'm very grateful of it. I'll never forget you two being at my dad's funeral. That meant so much to me. It was surprising, but at the same time it wasn't, because that's how good of people you really are. Mike, you definitely went through some flack at times, and sometimes I was young and stupid and acted kind of like a little smart mouth jerk, and I apologize for that. But
you've nothing to apologize for. I mean, we worked around the clock. We worked way longer hours and cared a lot more than we should have cared in the business sense. And I think we all gave 183% all the time, and I think that was to our demise at times. At the same time, I don't think that even rivals, frankly, would look back now and go, I don't know how those guys pulled all that crap off. And I think has a lot to do with our members, has a lot to do with Vanderbilt. A lot of people at Vandy really appreciated us personally and supported us personally and cared about us personally. John being one of them, John Ingram. But I also think it's just the work ethic that we all had, individually and collectively, pushed us through the challenging times that seemed to come like clockwork. I mean, I remember just calling up you guys and going, it's been going too good. There's something coming. There's a storm coming. I just know something bad is about to happen. And sure enough, 3 days later, something would hit the message board that would just be a nuclear reaction. But I think that, what we've accomplished together, we couldn't have accomplished apart from each other. And it says a lot about just our work ethic and willingness to do the best work we could do.
Well, and I'll close with this. I think that I realized early on, and this is still the case. I mean, the faces have changed. Sean Williams has done a tremendous job for us. David Sisk is doing a tremendous job for us. Justin Angel has done tremendous work for us. Yeah, I mean,
I was really happy when Brent joined you for a while there, because I was happy to give him that opportunity, and Brent Carden to get into taking photos. So he's a very, very good guy that also I had a short time knowing him, but it was really rewarding.
Yeah, BC's awesome.
Yeah, he's an awesome guy.
Yeah, Brent's just. There's been so many of them over the years. I think the thing that kept me in it long enough with you guys was the friendships. We had our disagreements at times,
Exactly.
but in the end, we're always friends, and we still are.
Yeah.
I think that also goes for the network of people that we serve. I think that if this had just been a financial thing, it would have never gotten to where it was. I think that my vision from the beginning was I just thought it stunk to follow the program and did not have a lot of coverage, to not have people going to a lot of practices or covering recruiting. And I just always felt like, okay, I think the fan base deserves that. And that was always our goal, is to, not that we always did it perfectly, not that we do now, not that if a bus hit me tomorrow that the beat wouldn't go on. But I think we have left our mark, and it's always been a community thing. It's not just been the people that have worked with us and worked since you guys, but it's been the people who have sponsored our shows, the John Ingrams, the Josh Mittens, the Taylor Sutherlands, Bowl and Branch, those guys that had a vision and said, we like what you guys do. We want to be a part of this. We hope the partnership makes us money, but if not, we're in it because we feel like this community needs a voice. And I feel like we have had help from so many people through the years, from people that subscribed with this, from almost day one, or not far in. I always feel like this has always been a thing that's been bigger than any of us. And I think eventually it's the relationships that make things fail, and it's the relationships that keep things together. And we would not be 17 years in this, and I say we, including you guys, because even though you're not with me now, you had a hand in it. If it weren't for the relationships across the board, it would have never been worth it, and we still wouldn't be here. And I'm just grateful for the people that have touched us in our time doing this.
Feel the same way.
Chris, well said. Exactly.
With that, we are going to end the program. Thank you for listening to the VandySports podcast. We will have shows later in the week. I promise they will not be this long. I hope they will be enjoyable. Thank you for listening if you made it to the end, and we'll see you again soon.